Hello, thank you for joining me. Happy New Year for those who are coming in live right here at the beginning of January 2022. You are on the Bright Talk channel for People First Potential, brought to you by People First Productivity Solutions. And I'm Deb Calvert, and I'm really excited to be with you here today for our topic, which is about etiquette. It's about etiquette in this new environment of work from home that we're all experiencing, this new environment where also often we are now in meetings, usually virtually. I want to let you know, for those who are new to the channel or new to Bright Talk, that I always load you up with resources. So right underneath the video, you'll see a tab called Attachments. Be sure and dive in there. One of the first things that you might want to take advantage of will be the PDF of the slides that I'll be using in this presentation today. Help yourself to that. I try to give that to you each time that we meet. And as long as you're in there, think about connecting with me. I am over on LinkedIn, and we provide lots and lots of content and links and always have reminders about the upcoming sessions for you there on LinkedIn. So see if you can take advantage of that opportunity. I also just really like to get to know the people who come to the channel and look forward to any engagement that we might be able to have, your questions, your comments, your ideas for other presentations that we ought to be doing. This is part one in a series. For the next 12 months, once a month, I will be bringing you content in the Why Wait to Be Great series, because everything we do here at People First Productivity Solutions is related to unlocking people potential. One of the ways that we do that is through our online academy. It is called People First Leadership Academy. There are some courses there that are low cost, and some, of course, programs that are no cost. Our most popular one has really taken off. It's called Essentials of Personal Effectiveness. So if you look in the attachments, you go to People First Leadership Academy, and you look for the class called The Essentials of Personal Effectiveness. For 13 weeks, once a week, you'll get a free access to videos and written materials that will help you through that course. It's suitable for leaders at every level, and I think you'll find that it goes hand in hand with this series, the Why Wait to Be Great series. All right, well, let's dive into our topic. What necessitates this conversation is that so much has changed. Whether you're working from home full-time or part-time, or you have colleagues who work from home even though you're primarily on site, or maybe it's your customers and they are now doing things where they want you to be in the virtual space with them as opposed to in person. This applies for any of those scenarios. Work from home has really, really had an impact. For one thing, I'm noticing a lot more that there seems to be a certain tension between people who are working at home and those who are on site. One of the things to be thinking about as you might move toward blended models, for example, it's just difficult. It's difficult to have the same interaction and the same relationships with people who are remote as it is with the ones that you are literally in the same space with. And those tensions and some of that finger pointing, some of those misunderstandings, they are noteworthy. They are having an impact. So we've got to figure out how to navigate and make the best of the situation. I think this is freshly important to us because you may have figured a lot of this out in 2020 and on into 2021. But now that we're doing a little bit more back and forth, and with Omicron forcing a lot of people back into that work from home situation, it's timely to revisit what you've done and what you could do to make this easier and more effective for everybody. Now, that's just the first bullet, and it's a big one, but look what else we are dealing with. These are all realities. There are staffing challenges. The Great Resignation is real. Whether people are on site or off site, they seem to be very open to finding something new, to doing something different, to finding a place where they don't have the same negative associations that perhaps they've developed because of the work from home situation and all that's been happening in the pandemic. Part of what causes people to feel disengaged is that it's not as easy to have time with the boss, and certainly not as easy to have routine, regular kinds of conversations with your colleagues. We get onto these Zoom or Teams meetings and we just don't have the time for small talk, for really getting to know people, for letting people know we genuinely care about them and are interested in what they're experiencing. And one of the things that precludes us from doing that, one of the reasons we don't, is because we know that everybody is experiencing some measure of screen fatigue. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and now people have been for 6 or 7 hours on screen all day long, no break, because the meetings are on screen just like the rest of the work is. And because we are on screen so much, we are exposed to a lot more information than ever before. And that information overload is exhausting. It's confusing. We're barraged with so much that we have no idea how to even sort through it and what to do with it. That adds to our stress and our agitation, and it interferes with our relationships. Piling on top of all of that, even though we're already so overexposed to so much information, we find that a lot of people are multitasking during meetings. So they're doubling up. In an effort to keep up, they're not only trying to take in all the information delivered in the meeting, but they're checking emails, doing research, catching up, whether it's on a smaller screen or on the same screen where they still look like they're making eye contact. Um, we're all doing it, and it's adding to that information overload and that lack of engagement. And that's why when you hear the words collaboration now or team meeting, what's really happening is that everybody's trying to expedite. We're all just trying to get to a decision, any decision that we can all agree on just as quickly as possible. We aren't having those deep dive, thoughtful discussions, those debates. We're not looking at things from all the angles because we can't. We're already overwhelmed. And there is no break because if we're working from home or being very cautious about social distancing, then we're not having team building events or casual conversations around the proverbial water cooler. We're not having celebration events. We're not doing the things that we used to do, the kinds of things that made us feel really connected to people, the kinds of things that created a sense of belonging, maybe even a sense of family with our colleagues in our workplace. So that's the reality. That's what causes us to need to examine executive etiquette, really etiquette for everybody. But I say executive etiquette first and foremost because whatever's modeled from the top, well, that's what people are going to think is the standard. That's what they're going to be replicating. And having said all of this, which I know sounded rather harsh, I do want to pause for a moment to say, I honestly believe that we're all doing the best we can. A year ago, right? The year ago, things were different. Schools were closed. People were juggling the setup of a home office, the oversight of schoolwork and keeping the kids occupied, the work that everybody needed to do with fewer resources and less access to others. Well, at that time, a year and a half ago, right, we expected to see that people didn't have good lighting, that they didn't have the best of setups, their internet, their background, their home office. It wasn't what it needed to be. And there was distractions because the kids were home because there was so much competition during meetings for a participant's attention. But over time, we all got a little bit better at this. And as we got better, as we got more comfortable, we started doing more of that multitasking. We started to get a little bit more relaxed in our demeanor, in our dress, in our allowances for what might be in the background, maybe a little casual in some ways. Our habits, our dress codes, our technical difficulties, our adjusted work hours, our subpar interactions with people. right? All the realities that were listed on the previous screen haven't always been addressed. We haven't taken this into account. People had to make it up for themselves. And now that there's a movement back toward more people working from home, a movement in many places for more permanent blended models or work from home situations, we really do need to address what's on this screen. And we need to start setting some expectations so people know and they feel secure. And it's not just up to each individual to interpret and make their own decisions. It's puzzling to people when they come to a meeting where they think it's camera on, but a whole lot of other people have cameras off. And you can't really even tell who's truly at the meeting, only who's dialed into the meeting. And make no mistake, those are two entirely different things. So without seeing people, right, you're missing visual cues for interaction. People can't read, they can't react to each other. And I believe research bears this out. It's unrealistic to think that people are fully focused if they're not on camera. When a topic isn't absolutely relevant and fascinating, it's just too tempting to step away for a moment or to check email or to get back to a pressing, urgent task that's on your mind. And the more this goes on, the harder it is to have quality meetings of real substance. And I'm talking one-to-one meetings, group meetings, team meetings, meetings even with customers and others. We all started out doing the best we can. We got to a pretty good point, but without clear expectations, everybody now knows the shortcuts. And I'm afraid that some of these bad habits are now further eroding the quality of our meetings and our time together. And make no mistake about this either. There are risks if you're not taking this into account and directly addressing some of the problems I'm describing. Before COVID, there was data that revealed that only 25% of employees described their workplace as a happy one, and less than half reported being happy in their current job role. And sadly, these numbers have fallen even more since work from home and since protective measures altered workplace locations and relationships for so many employees. So Gallup, their recent analysis found that 48% of America's workers are actively job searching. The Great Resignation. That's actively. That doesn't even include the number who are open to offers that might come their way. And already, businesses have record numbers of unfilled positions, and resignation rates are already, here at the beginning of 2022, already at all-time highs. There's a whole lot of other surveys out there that make this pretty alarming. For example, there are several surveys recently that report that up to 90% of employees say they would accept less pay in exchange for being able to do work that's more meaningful. And fewer than 20% of employees worldwide see a connection between their company's public perception and their own work experience. In other words, the meaning they want to have in their work isn't what they're experiencing in their day to day. Okay, now I say all of this for context. These are the problems, these are the issues, the realities that we're facing. And with that context in place, I'd like to look at etiquette breaches that further exacerbate these issues. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about executives, but this applies to everybody. I'm talking about executives because executives are the ones who have to model the way. Your executive team, that's where the eyes are, whether it's literal or figurative. What they're doing sets the pace. What the people at the top of the organization, wherever the sight lines are, what they do, that's what others think is the norm, the standard that they should be doing as well. So this doesn't have to be top tier executives. If I primarily have a sight line to my own manager, right, I'm including manager, in what I call executive etiquette, because those managers also pick up cues from next level and so on. I'll be talking a lot about meetings because I believe that that is the primary interaction. Maybe it already was, but especially with work from home, I don't have those casual conversations. I don't have the pass by in the hallway. I have formal, planned meetings with everybody in my organization. I don't have any other FaceTime with them. So meetings have become all the more important in terms of setting. So these etiquette breaches, they apply in meetings, but if you are in same space, really there's nothing I'm going to say that won't cross over and apply in those scenarios too. So here's the big 7. We'll take them one by one, but headline is this: a lot of bad habits about how meetings are set. I think in some organizations, it's become almost the norm for people to get ambush invitations. It's the thing that just shows up on your calendar with no warning. And if that meeting invitation comes from somebody high enough up the food chain, well, the unspoken expectation or interpretation of it is that you're supposed to drop everything else, juggle your schedule, and show up for that meeting, even if it's short notice, even if you have no idea what it's all about. And so you do. And oftentimes, those meetings end up being, well, fairly meaningless, at least for you. But you're there because somebody thought you should be, and you're just going to figure out how to fit all the other pieces into place. Now, because of what I mentioned earlier, it's also an etiquette breach, not only to ambush people with invitations, not only to not give them context for the meeting and to include the right people, but also remember, these are primarily now on screen where people are spending so much time already. So you are further compromising their ability because you have them in a meeting and you have them on screen where they're getting eye fatigue and no break, and it's just a slog. It's hard to sit right there in front of the computer for those extra minutes that are demanded of you now. It's also an etiquette breach when there are distractions or detractions that are occurring during the meeting. One person in the meeting showing up late costs everybody in the meeting those minutes. Do the math sometime. If your meetings routinely start 10 minutes late and you have 10 people in the meeting, well, that's 100 minutes. And if you take the salary for that over an hour and a half plus of all 10 people in the meeting, what's the real cost? The cost of starting a meeting 10 minutes late adds up. And if it's every meeting, it adds up fast. Same thing is true when the meeting gets derailed by all those background distractions or the things that are going on. The person who steps away for a phone call and then has to come back and everyone has to wait while they catch that individual up. Right? These are breaches in etiquette that affect every single person who's a part of that meeting and every single person who would have had the benefit of the meeting participants' time but couldn't access them during the meeting. Here's a big one. I'm going to be a little hard on executives on this one because I actually put this presentation together because I got a bit fed up with what I was personally witnessing and hearing about. And that's a double standard. If you do have standards, if you do set expectations informally or formally, please be sure that the folks at the top are abiding by those standards. It sends a mixed message. It's very confusing when there are expectations for everybody else, but then the person who called the meeting or some executive ends up breaching those etiquette standards. And then it's also an etiquette breach to neglect the little things, the ones that when we were all in the same space together, they came naturally. They were social niceties. They made people feel connected. And neglecting those things is yet another type of etiquette breach we should talk about. And last but not least, we'll talk about that piling on of information overload or infobesity is creeping in and affecting every person in virtually every kind of job. I'm going to take these one by one. You've heard the headlines here, but let's talk about ambush invitations. I just think it's a poor etiquette, unless there is an extreme, occasional exception when you set a calendar invitation without even checking the availability of others. And the shorter notice that that meeting is, well, the harder it is for people to juggle and to make that happen. They do, so it feels like it's really no big deal, but that means you're a little out of touch. It might mean that your ego's causing you to make some bad decisions. People are busy. People have a lot to do. Other people count on them for their deliverables and the tasks that they've agreed to perform. And every time you pull somebody into one of your meetings on short notice, you're pulling them away from something else that they were prepared to do, required to do, someone else was counting on them to do. So try hard not to allow seniority to drive your ego and to cause you to be inconsiderate of at what cost to others. And if you're going to invite people to meetings, try to allow enough time to give them an opportunity to prepare. Give them time to think, to check with others, to gather their thoughts or the information that they need so that they can really contribute. And last but not least, if you do set last minute meetings, set your expectations about proxy attendance. If I can't attend because I have a very important commitment, could I appoint a colleague to come to that meeting? And if I do, will you take that colleague seriously and not be dismissive of him or her because it's not me? So think all these things through as you determine when and how meetings should be set, and really try hard to avoid ambush invitations, because even if people respond, it doesn't mean that that was an easy thing for them to do. What it probably means is that they're responding to your positional power and they feel like they don't really have a choice, that they aren't allowed to say no to your meetings. So I'd ask you to be really, really careful about that. Now, I should tell you, because we're talking so much about meetings, don't forget about the attachments button right under the video here. One of the things that I provided for you today, and I provided a lot of meaty stuff today, but one of the things that you'll find there is about um, meetings. It it's a compilation of data that we've put together for you. Some of it comes from as early as 2016, 17, pre-COVID, so that you have a contrast with what's going on now post-COVID, and how even though we have so many more great tools for virtual meetings, how by and large meeting quality has deteriorated even so. So if you like that kind of data and you want a fun, quick read, you want to be able to scan something that's interesting and easy to read, be sure and take that attachment. All right. Now, the second problem with meetings, of course, is that so many of them are absolutely meaningless, at least to the people who are there. And they end up being meaningless because nobody thought about the desired outcome. We called the meeting because we had a problem. We didn't think about the purpose of the meeting. Is it to discuss, i.e., admire the problem? Is it to brainstorm for solutions? Is it to implement a new policy about that problem, gather data about the problem, come to a solution and an agreement that would really solve the problem, do root cause analysis? Why are we here? What is it that we're doing? When you know what you want from the meeting, it's an outcome based meeting, you have a much better chance of inviting the right people and allowing them to be prepared in the right frame of mind with the right information to participate in that meeting and achieve that outcome. Another reason that meetings are often meaningless is because they end up being ego driven. And what I mean by that is we've got a leader. The leader believes it's important to have a meeting once a week, doesn't really know what the agenda will be. It's all pretty free flowing, but it's driven by the leader, the person who called the meeting, the thought that they should have a meeting. If I have Deb's meeting every week and I'm going to make it up as I go along and spring a bunch of stuff on people, it's probably pretty meaningless. We don't get to a point where we can really have action items and next steps and deliverables and deadlines and accountability because there's not much commitment. The meeting feels like a waste of time, and frankly, it probably is largely a waste of time if it's driven by my ego and just my desire to have people show up because I said so. Meaningless meetings, well, wrong people being there. If I'm one of the wrong people, it's meaningless to me. If it is more of a one-way directional thing, that's a pretty meaningless meeting. In fact, that could have just been a memo or an email. What's the point of bringing people together if you're not going to invite full participation and engagement? If it's a foregone conclusion and it's just a formality to have a meeting, well, that's pretty meaningless. So think about ways, good etiquette, to be thoughtful about other people's time. And that includes making sure that your meetings are facilitated well, that your meetings have professional facilitation. I'm not saying you have to hire a professional facilitator, although sometimes that is warranted. But I'm saying that you probably ought to have some basic facilitation skills taught in your organization to the people who routinely conduct meetings. This is about how to manage the agenda, how to flow through, how to make sure that the outcomes you're aiming for are achieved, and that you are bringing every person who's there into the discussion, including introverts. We're not going to exclude them just because they don't speak up as fast. By the way, if you happen to be an introvert and you find meetings to be challenging, there is a presentation here. I think it's about 2 years old, but right here on this channel, there is a presentation called An Introvert's Guide to Business Meetings. You might want to check that out. So, to make a meeting meaningful and to not allow it to be something that's meaningless, there are just some really basic techniques that you can follow. I'd like you to invite you to take the attachment called 10 Fixes for Miserable Meetings. It's going to give you a place where you can sign up for a free course on People First Leadership Academy. We've written a blog series. We're publishing an ebook about this very same topic. But if you'd like to attend an interactive workshop about miserable meetings and how to fix them, that would be a place to start. All right, executive etiquette breach number 3 is about screen time. Remember, this includes one-to-one meetings, not just the meetings where you've got a whole group of people together. But look at this shocking statistic. This is pretty sad. During the pandemic, of course, the amount of time people spend in front of a screen has increased significantly. That probably goes without saying because we don't have in-person meetings. But there's a huge body of work, additional research that says there are implications of this, even at the level of physical and mental health. There are implications for a business in terms of dramatic losses in productivity. And there's a cost, a hard, fast dollar cost to organizations because of this. See, other work isn't getting done. Everybody's feeling this screen fatigue, but then there's a desire to cram in even more meeting time that keep people on screen. So just be thoughtful, look for ways to make sure your meetings that you do have are meaningful, that they're productive, they're outcome based, and that people are doing other things. They're allowed to do other things besides staring at a screen all day long in meetings they don't need to be in. Now, I said that this is primarily important for executives. Well, That's true, but this applies to everybody. These numbers I'm showing you, by the way, they all come from research from August and September of 2021. So it's pretty recent. I'm going through several factoids here. Um, at the very same time, when people are on screen too much, people are developing addictions to being on screen. So it perpetuates the problem. And people know that they're having this problem, that they're developing this addiction. 66% of us say we spend way too much time looking at screens. But even though we're spending all that time on screen, it's not all about work. See, everything sort of blurs together. We're on screen, so doing a quick check on Instagram or putting something in my Amazon cart or being able to email with a daycare director. These things, I'm right there at my computer. I can multitask and do them fairly quickly. We think we're spending about 42 minutes worth of break time each workday, but those breaks are actually almost 3 hours a day because of all of that other stuff we're doing as we're sitting at our desk, as we are sort of doing our work. We're handling some of this other stuff too. And it takes longer to do the job. There's no way around it. I'm called into meaningless meetings. I get ambushed into meetings. I am not quite aware of how much time I'm spending on non work tasks. So it forces the day to be longer and less work gets done. In one study, 10,000 employees, remember, this is all from September 2021, um, people said that their work increased by an average of 30%, and about 18% were talking about having to work beyond business hours to get it all done. Despite all those extra hours, output is declining, and meetings are largely to blame for that. So I want you to think about all of this because when you do have meetings, they've got to be good. And it's important for executives to model this, and it's important to be thoughtful about what you are inadvertently signaling if you don't model professionalism during your meetings with good etiquette. Now, I'm going to show you some examples here. I'm going to talk about some examples. Every one of them is real. Every one of them is something I observed within 2021. And I do think it's because of what we've talked about here for context. You probably remember, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was flocking to Zoom and Teams exploded and more online meetings were taking place. I mean, it took a while for people to figure out the lighting. But even now, as recently as yesterday, uh, I show up in a meeting and there's at least one person who looks like they're in witness protection. They don't have good lighting. They probably don't know how to get good lighting, but you can't see the individual, even if they're on camera. And it doesn't cause you to have that professional interaction with them. You can't see their face and their expressions, so it's really hard to engage. We got to continue being cognizant of what's happening around each person in the meeting. You do this for yourself. Executives, make sure you model the right thing. Find a room where you can close the door. I know that you're at home, and I know that you have to deal with the realities of being at home, but at what cost to everybody else in that meeting? And here's one that's avoidable. More often than not, we don't have to multitask. We can take 10 minutes off camera, not being in a meeting, to eat lunch. We don't have to walk on the treadmill. We don't have to walk the dog. We don't have to be driving when we're in important meetings. This one is probably becoming a little controversial. I've even heard executives say, we're in meetings all the time. We have to be multitasking. We make allowances for multiple devices, people opting out of being on camera when they get a phone call that they have to take. But see, I've seen this happen. I've seen it allowed and even tacitly encouraged. And yet there's also the impact, and I've seen that. You have too. How many times in a meeting does something need to be repeated? How much backtracking is there? How much is going on in chat as you try to catch people up and you've got this influx, people in and out and in and out and sort of there and not there? It makes for a ridiculously unproductive scenario in meetings. And gosh, I feel like we're back in 1980 talking about dress codes. But what is your dress code for people coming into meetings when they're working from home? Everything you see there on screen, workout attire, shorts and a tank top, bedhead, unshaven, Zoom studio effects that are silly, wearing a robe. Right? How many of these would you put into your dress code if you had a formal one at work? And yet, how many allowances for things like that do you make in your meetings? And when I say I've seen every one of these, I'm talking about I've seen every one of these from executives who are modeling it to others. And when I ask about it, because I do a lot of executive coaching and it's my job to ask the provocative questions. When I ask people about this sort of thing, they usually laugh it off a little bit. They say, oh, just it's the reality, casual because I know everybody has to be casual. Um, we'll laugh about it. I'm just human. And I kind of get it. I get the intention. But again, I have to ask the question, at what cost? Because given enough time and enough opportunities to see somebody in some place up on the org chart doing behaviors like this, pretty soon everybody else is doing it. And pretty soon there's a complaint. My employee showed up to a meeting with a customer today and was clearly unshaven and wearing just a t-shirt. Okay. Where did they get the idea that was okay? It has an effect. If that's okay with your organization, no indictment here. I just want you to be aware and thoughtful about the fact that double standards are confusing and they're not fair. And if you have double standards in your organization, your credibility is at risk. So let me give you a few more double standards that I've seen or heard direct complaints about. A company, for example, that required every meeting be cameras on, except for the senior executive who decided during the pandemic to travel the country via RV, work from anywhere, and seldom had good enough connectivity to do cameras on. Double standards for recurring meetings. Well, who's supposed to be there? Who's supposed to be prepared for those meetings? Who's supposed to put those on the calendar? Is it the executive? And if so, is everybody else supposed to be there if the executive isn't? And I think this one may be the most important one in this entire presentation. Just because it's work from home and it's a meeting that's in a virtual space, try to honor those one-to-one times, those one-to-one development meetings, check-ins with people. For employees, that's usually the most important meeting on their day. And when an executive or a manager doesn't show up or sort of takes for granted that, hey, I'm busy, they'll understand, we'll catch up some other time, it can really be a letdown. So just think about what you're signaling to employees if your one-to-one times aren't sacrosanct. There's also a double standard in how meetings get booked. Executive books a meeting, whammy, it can show up on your calendar anytime, and you've got to do the fire drill to make it all come together and find a way to show up for that meeting. But you want to call a meeting with the executive, and you've got a gatekeeper to go through, and it's like giving up your firstborn to be able to secure a time. And then there are the work hours. Just because people are already at home, just because they could hop on a quick Zoom meeting, do you really want to call them into a meeting at 7:30 p.m., Saturday at 10 a.m.? It's the power of positional thing that causes them to respond, and they would never ever think to ask you for meetings during those times. So be careful not to have double standards, to be thoughtful, and especially to be thoughtful about the little things because they're not so little. These are big things. They're very big things that matter to individuals. It's these little things that cause people to feel engaged and connected, to have a sense of belonging in the organization, to want to stay in your organization as a member of your team. So build in the extra minute or two to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I'm just checking on you. Haven't had a chance to be in a meeting with you for a few days. I just want to know how you're doing. How's your family? What's going on? How were your holidays?" Or pick up the phone. I'm saying phone so you don't have the screen time. Pick up the phone and say, "We had the meeting today and I really didn't hear your opinion. We were all moving so fast, but I want to make sure to hear from everybody. This is going to be an important decision that we make, and I'm very interested in your opinion." Or just to bring people together for a little download. What's on your mind? What's going on? Or for some team building, or to recognize people and encourage and praise them. All the things that you aren't doing because you're not in person, same space, they still need to be done. Find ways, creative ways to make them happen. And last but not least, as you think about everything else that I've said, please keep in mind that infobesity is extremely difficult to navigate. The more people are on screen, the more information they're exposed to. The more they're exposed to, the more overwhelming it can be because there's so much that is conflicting and ambiguous, and you're asking them to make decisions, but they are completely confused because of the onslaught of sources and information. And if they have to be in that place with all that information and nobody's helping them make sense of it, well, that's where you get echo chambers and groupthink and bad decision making. So you need to be a sense maker. A sense maker is someone who helps people to take information that they have and make sense of it, to think through it, to be able to consider what it means and how it's important. If you've never heard the term sense making, I encourage you to download the ebook that I've put up there for you. It's free. It's all about infobesity. But also, sense making is the topic of next month's presentation in this series, Why Wait to Be Great? So while you're here, go ahead and sign up for that one. It'll be early in February. Let's wrap up here. Good executive etiquette boils down to putting people first. It's considering the impact of your actions on others. To think about people. What is it going to take to dignify and respect and appreciate and ennoble the employees on your team? One of the things you can do is to set clear expectations for work from home practices and then to really model them, to take them seriously, and not let everything be on screen. In the moment, take time to really be human, person to person, individually. Do everything you can to consider that people are overwhelmed and that they have competing priorities, and your meeting isn't the only meeting. It might not even be the most important meeting. And with all of that, try very hard not to be an information dumper. Instead, work to become a sense maker. All right, so we got to wrap up because that's what the clock says. Don't forget to get over to People First Leadership Academy. That's peoplefirstpotential.com. You'll find lots of individual learning opportunities there. Many of them are free. 10 Fixes for Miserable Meetings is there. And if you're interested in group training, well, let's talk. You can take a look at our website, People First PS. But I'd be really interested in talking with you about the situations that you're experiencing, the problems that you're having related to leadership, team effectiveness, and productivity in your organization. That's what we do here at People First Productivity Solutions. We help you find the ways to unlock your organization's potential by putting people first. If you would please leave me a review. I always appreciate your comments. Take the downloads that are relevant for you and let me know how we can help you in 2022.